All right, so top of the hour, we're going to go ahead and jump in, folks. I am very excited to present to you. I've been doing this for about 8 years now, and every blue moon, you run across somebody who is a master in their craft. But here's the thing, guys: there's a master in your craft, and then there's being a master at being able to communicate it to other people. Whole new skill set. David has both of those and that he's brought here today. Now, David does many things in terms of executive leadership on the highest levels of for-profit corporations, alongside being a coach currently. So we're going to get to that a little bit later because his service is powerful, transformative. But the piece that we really brought him here for today was board leadership. And I've said this earlier on, for me, Black executive men, it's very personal. I want to be surrounded by the best of the best of the best, guys that are going to unlock their mind, their potential, and reach for the stars in terms of their careers. And board leadership is one of those pieces, and probably not one of the pieces you should wait to the last minute in order to figure that piece out. So David's going to be able to touch on that. We're going to start at 101 basic, and then we're going to get to some advanced levels as well. So let's go ahead and jump in. But I really like to give guys a stage to introduce themselves. They're going to be able to do it best. So David, if you could jump in, give us the introduction, and then we're going to jump right into the 101 on board leadership.
Wonderful. Well, hey, good afternoon. Thank you, Jewel, for inviting me today. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. I hope I have the opportunity to connect otherwise on the phone, Zoom, Teams, whatever platform that we have access to. But I'm happy to go deep today on a variety of topics, primarily focusing on board service. I'm David Albritton, originally from Philadelphia, go Eagles, former naval officer, went to U.S. Naval Academy, spent 10 years as an officer in the Navy, got out in 1998 and started a career in corporate communications. So most of my career was in corporate communications, worked at a number of companies, but culmination of that was chief communications officer at a $6.5 billion defense company called Excelis, spun off from ITT back in 2011. Excelis got acquired. I went to General Motors, where I ran all global communications for GM outside the U.S. 3.5 years into that job, got promoted to become the president of General Motors Defense, their aerospace and defense business. And then left after a couple of years, went to Amazon Web Services as the vice president of communications. And then life changed for me, gents. And this is something that you should always be thinking about, because you sometimes get a left hook that you don't expect. My oldest daughter got diagnosed with a form of leukemia in 2021 in March. And so a leave of absence from Amazon turned into a full resignation. And it was time to reevaluate life, and ended up not going back to corporate. And started my own business. I became a full-time executive coach. So I've been doing that for 3.5 years now. But it was around that time that I entered the interview cycle for the current board seat that I hold as an independent director on the board of a $1.2 billion diabetes care business called Embecta. Embecta spun off from Becton Dickinson and officially as of April of 2022. So I'm on the inaugural board. There's a total of 9 of us to include the CEO. And so I've been serving now for just over 2 years, and it's been an absolute joy, a brand new experience for me, and I'm happy to dive into that today with you.
Fantastic, folks. We're going to go ahead and jump in. I just want to say kudos to all the brothers that suited up for this. Like we said, it's happening real time, right? You're putting eyes on David. Guess what? He's putting eyes on you real time. So if you've never met him before, this is the first go, and it's an opportunity for all of us. We're going to be doing some real-time networking here. We're going to be seeing who are the executives that are willing to provide mentorship to the more junior members of the community. We're going to ask about boards. Who has a board opening? Who's looking for a board role in real time as well? So let's just go ahead and jump in. But a question for the audience before we jump to David with Board Service 101. Who here is considering being on a corporate paid, not non-paid, not nonprofit, corporate paid board? If you are, please put I am in the chat box. Let's just get a little poll and see who's interested in being on a paid corporate board. Okay, so we're getting quite a few. Bassie and Brandon, Alex as well. Daniel, shout out to you. Good to see you. Gary, love it, love it, love it. Kellen, good to see you. Alan, Anthony Williams, yes, yes, we got heavy hitters, folks. We got heavy hitters in the room. Anthony David, going to be a connection coming. Definitely going to get you brothers connected. Good stuff. David, let's go ahead and jump in while those IAMs are still coming in. Can you break down to us? I want you to talk to us, please, although we're not, but just talk to us like it's third grade. What does a board role, what is it even, not even what does it do? That's the next question. That's like fifth grade. What is it? What is a board role in the corporate context?
Absolutely. So first, thank you for that question. The first thing you need to understand about a board is why it exists and what it does. Before that, though, you've got to understand the nature of a publicly traded company owned by shareholders and, all of the rules and regulations are associated with that. So, outside of all the branding and all the operations, all the clients, the customers, the products, the services, all that other stuff, publicly traded companies exist for one reason. That is to create value for its shareholders, period, all stop. Everything else is just everything else, right? That's how they do it. But the board is the fiduciary body that keeps the CEO and the management team in check and makes sure that from, a risk management perspective, a strategic guidance perspective, an ethical operation perspective, right? And that's what the oversight is, okay? The huge consideration in the transition in your own mind, because I imagine all of you have been fantastic operators for many, many years. And the biggest challenge I had as I transitioned into becoming a board member was not fully understanding that transition in terms of, and it's a simple term, it's nose in, fingers out. As an operator, your fingers in, you are operating this company, functionally expert in whatever capacity, and that's your job and your role and responsibility. That's not your job as a board member. Your job as a board member is to hold the CEO and the management team accountable for the effective and efficient operation of this company on behalf of the shareholders. So I actually work for the shareholders as a board member of Invecta. I don't work for the CEO. I don't work for anybody else. And my job is, as a board member, is to be responsible for the effective operation of this company to maximize the shareholder value for those people, institutional investors and individual investors and others who have invested in Invecta as a stock. That is why we exist. Now, there's a ton of rules and regulations around that, from a Wall Street perspective, from a congressional perspective and all that. So you need to understand, how important that role is, because if you do this role wrong, you are absolutely going to jail. That's the other side of this as well. Of course, one of the best practices on boards these days, on publicly traded boards at least, is to, compensate board members enough or cover the cost for third-party insurance in case there are lawsuits and those types of things. However, if you are a person that does not have good scruples, if you, are doing things that are not above board and those types of things, or you're just not paying attention and you're making bad decisions or recommendations, there can be negative aspects of, being a board member. So you have to go into this eyes wide open and prepared, fully for what this role and responsibility entails.
I love it. We got a lot of questions, guys. I want to just give you all the reminder, this platform, this space, this network, BEM Elite Membership Network. So this is for guys that are really looking to uncap their full potential, unlock that juggernaut, play on global leadership levels. And so in this community, guys are entitled to a meet and greet with our fireside guest ahead of time, priority Q&A when it comes down to Q&A, and a host of other benefits. So I just want to share that with you as well. If you're looking to be in that kind of a supportive, really accelerated community, I want to suggest taking a look at BEM Elite. That might be for you. But let's go ahead and jump back in. Folks, I want to get to the, Alan, keep those questions coming, but hold them as well, because we're going to get to all of those after the chat. I don't want to forget it. I know you won't, but just hold on to that. That's a good question. In terms of our current guest, is anyone, let's just go through the gamut of boards, right? Let's start with nonprofit, okay? Is anyone currently on a nonprofit board? Boys and Girls Club, the Heart Association. Go ahead, drop that in the chat box because I can't see everybody. We got so many people here. I can't see everybody in this chat. And drop the board. Just drop the board name in there. I want us to know that we're already doing this. We're already doing this as a community. And then we're going to get into the for-profit corporate. But let's just go ahead and see who's doing that. And while you're doing that, Benjamin Hinton, Best Dressed Award of the Day. Do I see a pocket square? Is that a lapel pin? We love that. Where's the brother? He bounced off my screen, but Adrian, definitely the clearest audio. The video, killing it with the video wherever you're at. All right, so Stanley Lewis. Looks like that's maybe career group, Kamar, publicly traded board, TSX, okay, exploration. So I'm guessing that's for profit. Emmanuel's NFP for Terrence. Shout out to you, Terrence. Chicago regional leader. National Association of Black Compliance and Risk Management Professionals. Ooh, that sounds awesome, Reginald. Good stuff as well. Francis, please go on mute, brother. Mute it. Good stuff. Here, let me mute it for you. Hold on. Good stuff. All right, and one more, chair of the Pivot Fund Audit Committee chair. Oh, we got quite a few. Anthony Williams of Boys and Girls Club as well. All right, so we're gonna move forward. I saw some people drop in the for-profit, but we can get into that just a little bit later. David, in terms of folks that are interested, and it looks like most guys are in landing in a for-profit board role. Now let's talk about those differences. Let's get into just some of the differences. For-profit, nonprofit. Is it the same? Is it different? What's the difference? What's the similarity for guys that are thinking through which path they want to go?
The similarities, I'll say, are pretty simple. I mean, you are a steward of the organization, right? You are holding the CEO and the management team accountable in both instances. But as a nonprofit board leader, it's a volunteer role, right? There are still fiduciary responsibilities. There are still legal responsibilities as a board member in case the nonprofit entity is, going left and things aren't happening right. There's financial inefficiencies or malfeasance or whatever that might be. And so you as a board member can be held liable for that. And there are many large nonprofits that, take care of the insurance for those board members, but many do not as well. I've been on a number of nonprofit boards, and I've been very active on some in terms of, being involved in some of the committee work, et cetera. And others, it's just name only. It just depends on the culture of, that organization, how the CEO leverages the board, engages with the board, how he or she shares information and all those things. But you can have a disparate, type of experience on nonprofit side. On the for-profit side, it goes back to what I initially started off with. You own fiduciary responsibility for taking care of, the operation, how the CEO and the management team operate the company. You oversee the strategy and approve that strategy. You're helping to manage risk. And, it's really all about how this organization is going to grow and create more shareholder value. How are they making smart decisions? How are they developing the right talent? So you're thinking about pipeline in case the CEO goes down or leaves, who's the backfill? Same thing for your key and critical roles like the CFO and the COO, and other key roles, your CHRO, et cetera. And so there's a lot of oversight for that. There's a lot of discussion about that on a quarterly basis through your regular board engagements. But I have regular, at least quarterly, one-on-ones with the CEO. That's just my cadence, but I could have more. I know some of my colleagues on the board actually have more frequent one-on-one conversations with the CEO to get updates about the business, the markets, the competitive set, whatever that is. You can kind of create your own model for that in terms of what you need to be fully apprised, to offer, keen insights and ask solid questions. That's your biggest responsibility as a board member from my lens, is to be well studied on the overall operations of the organization, come in there to your board engagements and ask solid questions and make really solid recommendations. You also have to be ready to not be the popular vote as well. You have, because again, your job is to take care of the shareholders. And if you disagree with the strategic direction or strategic initiative or something related to how the operations of the company's going, it's your job to raise your hand. And you may be the dissenting opinion about this, as it relates to how your other board members see this, how the CEO hoped that it would play out, etc. But sometimes you've got to stand on, your business and hold yourself accountable to make the right decision and make that hard choice. And then be able to negotiate that appropriately with your other board members so that you can build consensus and then ultimately come out with the right decision on behalf of the organization. There's a lot of people paying attention to that, okay? Because if you think about the quarterly reporting, all of us that have worked in corporations for years, we know the quarterly earnings cycle, we know the 10Q, the 10K, the 8Ks, we know all of that and what's required from a Wall Street perspective. But what goes into those reports is critical as well, because you have to have a lot of trust that that management team and the CEO are putting the actual factual information in those reports that you were reviewing closely and then approving at the board level. If and when somebody's doing something that's not appropriate and the board approves it and all that, you think about, some of the bad examples of corporate governance in many years ago that has, created, all kinds of laws such as Sarbanes-Oxley and many others in terms of, how that these boards are now responsible for managing the operational cadence of the companies that they're working with.
So as we go into the next question, David, if you could so there's going to be a question for the audience, our listeners here. But David, if you could please drop your LinkedIn link into the chat box. We're going to do that multiple times, guys. I want you all to get connected. David is an open book. This dude is phenomenal. It reached the top, total open book. I mean, best of both worlds. So definitely, sometimes when they, you have these workshops and they don't drop the LinkedIn, you got to like sleuth and search and find them on LinkedIn and add them, and they still don't respond, that kind of a thing. We're creating a different environment, getting you connected right to the top of brothers that want to see you win and are willing to help you do so. So guys, take a moment. It's just one click. Go ahead and add them. You can send them a thank you message or something that you learned at the end of this talk. Make that connection and keep that conversation going. In terms of our audience, and thank you, David, for dropping that in there, let's get to the why. And while they're doing the why, I want to ask David a question about status. It's important. Status matters, man. It comes into play. So for the group here today, why do you, not others, or in general, why do you, there's no wrong answers here, guys, want to be on a paid corporate board? Why do you want that? Why do you want that? What's it about you and your journey? Not about Jewel and what he's talking about in a podcast, none of that stuff. You and your own journey. Why do you want to be on, absolutely, Philly's in the building, left Philly. Why do you want to be in a corporate board? Please drop that into the chat. Why do you want to be on a corporate board? Why is that in your life path? Why does that keep you up at night? Why does that motivate you in the morning? Why has that brought you here today? Why do you want to be on a corporate board? Let's get to it. Let's go deeper. Kamar, let's go. Guys, let's go deep. It's happening in real time. Let's go deep, guys. Why do you want to be on a corporate board? Go deep. Influence, representation, bringing integrity to a larger process, to be able to influence business at the highest level, okay? Zane says connections. Let's go deep. What kind of connections? Why do you want those connections? I want to be able to bring that ethical perspective as I learn AI. See, David, we're going to get into that. The niche angle is going to be key to getting on a board. Leadership, development, and sharing knowledge with the next generation. Love it. We got some give back in there. I want to influence. I want to be influential, bring ethics, drive organizational safety, and have a voice at the highest levels. It's about leadership, service, governance. Let's do one more. And that it breaks barriers that others maybe have as Blacks, and that it will inspire others. So we got an impact mission, give back, and of course, building wealth and professional growth as well. David, let's pivot. Guys, keep those coming in because people are reading that, and we're all being kind of conditioned toward these various reasons that our Just great reasons to hop on a board. But I'm curious for you, David, as we talk about why you wanted to be on a board, let's talk about another psychological piece, which is status. Now, guys, we can pretend like it doesn't kind of matter or exist in the corporate world, and for some it may not. But I think we should consider this piece, whether you value it or not, just to identify it. How does that impact one's status in the corporate world, David, to have a paid board role? So, why did you get into board leadership? Status, how does it impact that or not?
So for me, ironically, I mean, the idea for me that I could even contemplate doing it came late in my career. Was a corporate communications executive, and traditionally corporate communications people don't get to serve on boards of directors. That's just the history of that function. But as I transitioned in my career and I became a P&L owner at General Motors and became the president of GM Defense, it opened up a realm of possibilities that I never considered before. And then through the relationship I had that, actually got introduced to this board opportunity, it became more real just based on that relationship. I still had to go through the gauntlet of interviews and go all of that and create a value proposition to be considered. But had I not had that P&L responsibility, I don't think that I would have ever considered it to the level that I did. I used a lot of my experience as a chief communications officer and as a communications leader at multiple companies as part of the narrative for how I got considered for this board, particularly because it was a spinoff company. And I had been through a spinoff from Excelis. So Excelis was a $5.5 billion spinoff from ITT Corporation back in 2011. So I had that experience and I did a lot of engagement with the Excelis board of directors back then. And so I was able to use those experiences to characterize how and why I would be an added value proposition to the board of Invecta. Because I'm not a financial expert. I have solid financial acumen enough to be dangerous, but I am not a certified financial professional. I am far from that. Don't even like accounting, but enough to, at least be conversational about it, understand, financial statements enough to ask questions, to study them enough. And what I don't know, I know who to go ask so that I can ask the right questions and be at least knowledgeable in those areas. So again, it goes back to, I didn't think it was possible for me up until, later in my career. And then the reason I was, really interested in going into it was just kind of thinking about long-term influence, long-term, how my kids, I've got 3 kids, how they look. I've got 3 grandkids, just kind of creating that legacy of success and going well beyond what my goal and aspiration was. Because when I go back, I started my career in the Navy. And when I got out of the Navy, my total goal and aspiration was to become a chief communications officer at a Fortune 500 company. And 13 years later, I did that. So after I checked that box, I was good. As we used to say in the Navy, I was fat, dumb, and happy. I didn't need to go find another job. And then the world changed. Excelis got acquired. And so my career kept, moving forward. And so it created different considerations for me. And based on the relationships that I had, it opened up realms of possibilities that I didn't think, existed before. And so a lot of that just was a circumstance of the environment, of the situation and all that. And then magically, things happen. And for 2.5 years now, here's where I'm sitting. So I think if you think about that in your context, where you are, what you aspire to do in your career before you hang up the cleats and get off the field, right? What is your why? What is it that you're hoping to accomplish? Because, if you're not fully committed to it, you probably won't put in the full, effort and energy into totally pursuing it at a level that's going to hopefully make it successful as an outcome for you in the future.
Folks, we're going to jump all the way to the bottom of the well here. David, crushing it, knocking it out of the park. We did a podcast together. It dropped yesterday. So definitely go and check that out at the Black Executive Men podcast. You want to talk about reaching C-suite senior leadership, a master class, a full-on blueprint, phenomenal, in detail, granular about how to reach the top. But let's go through that now for board service. David, if you can, let's start at a couple of different places, right? Because we got different levels of seniority here. We got guys in senior leadership, we got guys in mid-level mentors. Frankly, we got entrepreneurs here. We probably got guys that are starting out, independent contributors, you name it. Let's look at a route for a mid-level manager And let's talk about a brother who's an SVP at a F500 company right now. Let's say they want to get on a corporate board. What concrete, granular action steps, preparation do they need to lock in place to make themselves the most qualified, the most likely, and let's just go for it, to get the result, to get on a board? What would you recommend that they step by step do? Guys, hopefully this is something and I'm sure it will be, we can start taking notes on this and get to work on it. David?
Yep. It starts with networking and it ends with networking. Okay. That is, it is essential because you don't get on boards by yourself, right? You've got to know the right people who are willing to sponsor you and are willing to bring you in the circle and put you out there so that you can hopefully go swim. We'll come back to that, etc. You got to start developing board relevant skills and those experiences that you'll need right now. So we talked about nonprofit boards. So yes, serving on a nonprofit board or an advisory board or something like that is great fodder for you to kind of think about developing those skills. But if you're going to be involved in one of those boards, make sure you're taking a leadership position. Make sure you get on that audit committee, or you're getting on another committee where you're showing leadership on that board because it's showing responsibility. It's showing that you have a risk tolerance. It's showing that you have capabilities beyond just sitting there and attending a board meeting every quarter, and that's it. Your financial acumen is critical as well. You don't have to be a CFO, but you've got to be able to read and interpret financial statements. And then you got to be able to ask the right questions and understand just kind of how the operation of that organization is working, how it's making money. You've got to understand the time commitment as well, right? This is, you are not an operator anymore. Now, of course, you put in 50, 60-hour work weeks as an operator in your functional discipline, et cetera. And even though you're meeting every quarter, I can tell you when I get board books, right, not only from the board meeting that I go to every quarter, I sit on two committees. So I sit on nominating governance committee and I sit on the technology regulatory and quality and regulatory committee, TQR. And so every quarter, each one of those, the board book is 125, 150 pages for each. And they're very detailed. They're PowerPoint. There might be other readings, etc. And when I go to have those conversations, I'm sitting there representing myself as a board member, I better have studied everything in those board books. So I am very smart about it. So then when either the CEO or somebody in the management team is actually reviewing the topic, I'm not just figuring it out for the first time because I didn't do my homework. Because it becomes very apparent very quickly to your fellow board members and the management team for somebody that doesn't come into that room fully prepared. And particularly if you're on a board that's not that diverse, then obviously they're looking at you a certain way anyway. And so if you come in and you aren't fully prepared and board ready, then obviously that's not a great place to be. So you've got to oversubscribe to really being ready to study and understand. And for those things that you don't understand, that's why you develop solid relationships with your fellow board members and develop, maybe when you start out, you find a board buddy, somebody on that board who's been there for a while, who you can call off hours, ask relevant questions to get some guidance, to talk about your misgivings or your misunderstandings or whatever that is, so that you are fully prepared to go into those board discussions and just knock it out of the park. Because if you're going to stay on that board long-term, you've got to be offering value. You cannot just come into a board meeting and be part of the furniture. That's not what they hired you for, right? If you're there and you've not prepared, you don't have good questions, you don't have good insights, and you're just filling a seat, that's not what they looked for. That's not why they hired you to be on this board. And if that's all you can offer to this board, then I can guarantee you're not going to be sitting there long-term. Because the best practice of boards these days is to do annual reviews of every member of the board. We grade harshly each other, how much we contribute, how did, we look, are we prepared? Are we a good fit personality-wise in terms of our collegiality, in terms of our ability to talk with one another, to talk about tough issues and work through them, even if we disagree, right? That's an annual practice that we're holding each other accountable for. And as a board, then that's what we, hold ourselves accountable to year over year over year. And so I say all of that, that's a lot that you have to be worrying about as you think about taking that seat. But the preparation for that starts now. but it's a different mindset for, how you're going to operate in that seat. Because again, your responsibility is to be nose in and fingers out. I know one of my biggest shortcomings when I first became a board member, just because I was still in operational mode in my head as a former chief communications officer, I wanted to know everything about the industry. I wanted to get copies of the news clips that the company had. I wanted to get competitive analyses. I wanted to dive in like I was still an operator and really dive in and get granular about the industry because that's what I felt I needed to do. Thankfully, I've got a CEO who, in one of my one-on-ones with him over dinner, when he came to DC one time, he too sits on an external board, and he counseled me. He said, "Hey, I'm happy to provide you with information, but you got to remember what your role is, right? You're a nose in, fingers out kind of guy. You don't need to be that deep into the woods in this. I need you to understand, or the company needs you to understand, the high-level financials, the strategy." Understand if we have risks as it relates to financials or operationals or reputationals or whatever that is. And, and particularly if, we've got an upcoming crisis, let's say we've got an activist investor that's about to come into the stock. Are you prepared to help the board work through something like that and the challenge? Are you going to commit the time to it? Because sometimes when these activists come in, I've heard boards. In fact, I've got fellow board members at Invecta who have been through these types of things. And they've had like 80 board members board meetings in a year when, now you'd plan for 6 or 7 in your schedule, but because you were committed to supporting this company and be doing, and committing yourself to taking care of this as a fiduciary responsibility, then you got to commit yourself to doing everything that the board's going to do to help protect the interests of this company. That's a part of it. And so you have to go into the process here and here ready to commit yourself to all of that.
So I think I maybe just have one, maybe 2 more questions. But this fireside is definitely not about me. David, this is about you. This is about our members here today getting the information they need. So guys, I'm going to get out of the way, maybe 1, 2 more questions tops. Then I'm going to step aside. But I want to actually pivot over to our members here today and those who are listening in the audience. And I want to ask you all, it's going to be kind of a sidestep question, but we're going to get back to the main topic. It's not going too far, but I just want guys that need different resources in different places to have them. So we definitely have David, who's here as a coach, but let's just create a little spaciousness for the other coaches that are accepting coaching clients. And if you can help guys, present themselves and get ready to get on a board, please drop those links for your services. That could be your website, that could be your LinkedIn, into the chat box. We want to give a shout out to our coaches, make sure that they get clients, that you guys who are looking for a coach actually has those resources present. So if we do have any coaches, go ahead and drop that link or your LinkedIn link in there now. David, I want to pivot back to you while that may get kind of jumping off there. In terms of race, racism, you name it, what are the challenges that our community may face in trying to find these board roles? Anti-Black sentiment, you name it. Let's just peel back all the layers, get to the bottom of the well. What are those racial challenges that we might be up against that our colleagues might not be up against? Or is that not a thing? Is that not something we should worry about? And if we should worry about it, how do we overcome that hurdle? Because the name of the game is success.
Absolutely. It absolutely exists. As I said on the podcast, as it related to my operational career, I worked for a lot of companies over the 25 plus years that I worked in corporations. And every single company, multiple times, did I have to deal with something related to race inside or outside the company. That's probably a lived experience for 100% of the people on this fireside chat. Absolutely. So as you extend that to boards, you're probably going to, find some of that depending on what the history of that board is, what the culture of the company is, what the culture of the board is, et cetera, et cetera. So circumventing that is kind of what your job one is in terms of understanding how you can kind of break the code in making yourself competitive enough to be considered for that board. So I would say that, getting on a board is as much about fit, right? Do you fit in that company, in that culture, as much as your qualifications as potentially a CFO or COO or CEO of your own firm or whatever that might be, because you've got to fit in with the individuals on that board. Now, since COVID, since George Floyd, there was a lot of public commitment to diversifying boards. The National Association of Corporate Directors, has been fully committed to that. The SEC put out requirements for, diversification of boards. There's been a lot of best practices about that, et cetera. But there's also been some reeling in of that as well over the last couple of years. And who knows what's going to happen, based on the political climate with respect to how committed the companies will be. That's going to exist and you can't control it. So don't over worry about those things. All you can do is control what's in front of you. And that is to make yourself best qualified for whatever that is, whatever the opportunity is. So that takes me back to networking, right? I'm not going to do it here because it's hard with, in a virtual format, but how many people have worked for multiple companies, right? You're a senior manager, you left and you went to go be a director, then you went to go be a VP, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How many people have kept solid relationships with the VPs and SVPs and the EVPs of the companies that they left? Most of us have not, right? But if you think about it, your growth trajectory has been exponential. You've done very well in your career. Well, a lot of folks that you used to work with have had the same experiences. And guess what? You worked with them 10 years ago and you had a phenomenal relationship and you jived and you fit and you trusted each other and all that. Well, some of those people now are either qualified for boards or they're serving on boards today. But we let that relationship go by the wayside. Okay. So if you think holistically about relationships and networking, as you commit yourself to trying to go, after board seats, you've got to universally go out to those people who can influence the outcome for how you might get considered for a board, right? And then, understand, if they actually sit on this board, is there an opening right now? If they are, going to have an opening over some time frame, how do you get considered? You got to understand the dynamics of that board, how they operate, how they socialize with one another, talking about things, how they deal with issues, formal, informal, there's a whole lot of things you need to understand before, you put your hat in the ring on some of these things. But you get that information through the value of your network. And so it's critical for you to have a strong network. Another thing is that, a lot of times we talk about, and just like, you asked, Jewel, you asked for a show of hands of folks who were interested, and we got a lot of, people who raised their hands and said, yes, I'm interested in doing this. Well, how many people inside your network and even, beyond that initial network actually know right now that you're interested in serving on a board, right? Many times we don't, put it out there. We don't characterize it. We don't share it widely enough with people. And then a lot of times we don't share it with the right people who can actually influence the outcome. And so you have to be very granular. You have to be very intentional about who knows that you're ready, you're qualified, you're capable, and you're very interested in board service. One thing that I learned within the last couple of years is the diversification of the types of boards, right? So I sit on a public company board, but there are also private boards as well for startups and those types of things. There's different levels, even though similar, responsibilities, but you don't have to sit on a public company board to get board experience to make yourself qualified and capable of serving on a public company board later in your career. Okay. There are people that sit on 4, 5, 6, or 7 boards. There's some people that just choose to sit on one. It's really up to you, but it's how much you're putting yourself out there. How many people know that you're a candidate to join certain boards, that you're available, that you have qualifications that they need? Because even if you were a CFO somewhere at a publicly traded company, you could be a CFO of a Fortune 50, all right? And you've got all that experience, et cetera, et cetera. That does not make you automatically qualified to join every board that has an opening. They may be looking for people to join the audit committee and all that kind of stuff, but there's so many intangibles outside of just being an expert CFO that they consider for you coming to join it, right? Are you personable? Are you trustworthy? Are you going to be somebody that's going to show up if we have 85 meetings because we've got, an activist investor coming into the stock? Are we going to be able to rely on you? Or are you going to just not really, handle this the way that you're supposed to? the board members want to know that. The CEO wants to know that, right? What are your values? Do you have the same values as us? You know, what are your likes? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? There's a whole lot other than you being an expert in a field that goes into the consideration. The only way that people get to know these things about you is through networking, is through relationships, capital R relationships. The person who most controls relationships in your entire ecosystem, you look at them in the mirror every day. There is nobody else on earth who's going to be as effective at maintaining and developing new relationships than you. So if you look at it as kind of a secondary responsibility or something that's optional or it's a collateral duty, then that's what your outcome is going to be, right? You've got to commit yourself every day to doing something that's going to expand your network in the right areas that is going to be advantageous for you in the future. For me, one of my best practices back when I was in operations, as communications guy, I spent an hour on LinkedIn every day, a total of about an hour, maybe not in one sitting, but every day I was on LinkedIn. I'm looking at posts, I'm staying up to speed with articles and kind of trends. I'm, commenting on topics, I'm, responding to posts, congratulating people. I'm staying active and I still do it today, right? That is the way that LinkedIn is the best free tool on the planet to expand your network. But what happens a lot is that we connect, right? Now we're first connection. And then I know with people I connect with a lot, I know who's really serious about networking, who doesn't by the many amount of times that we connect. Perhaps we just connected, we share a nice note in the chat, or whatever we've done, and then we never hear from each other again. We've networked to an extent, but we've not really developed a relationship. And it's definitely not a relationship that I would leverage to say, now I can recommend you for a particular board seat that I hear about in my network or something like that, because we really don't have a relationship. We're connected, but we don't have a relationship. If you're interested in getting on boards, you've got to develop a huge cross-section of relationships that are active. And they have to know your value proposition. They got to know what your expertise is. They got to know what your interests are. They got to know what your strengths and weaknesses are so that they can advocate on your behalf. Because if you think about the cycle and how these things happen, you can have the strongest champion who could be the board chair of a Fortune 50 board, okay? But that person is not universally and uniformly going to be able to get you over the hump on that board. You still have to go through the gauntlet of talking to other board members, to talking to some of the operators, to include the CEO. And, similar and dissimilar to when you were interviewing for your corporate jobs, right? This is a different interview, okay? They want to know different things. They want to understand what your expertise is, and your narrative about yourself is going to be different than when you were an operator. And so these are all things that go into the mix, if you will, when you're getting considered for a board.
Love it, guys. Full-on masterclass. You're going to have access to the recording as well, so you can go back and kind of piece this apart and pull the nuggets out that are going to be right for you to move you forward. Let's go ahead and get to the chat, and then we're going to go Q&A. We're still doing good on time, guys, but I want to move into some general questions from you all, but I want to move into real-time coaching questions. That question might be something like, this is where I'm at in my career, one sentence, guys, just right at it. And I want to be on this kind of a board, let's say, and talk about what are some next steps for you. I want you to walk out of here with your next action step. But let's go there now in the chat. Please put down, from what you've heard so far here today, what's your next step to getting on a board? You must have heard 10, 30, 50 different ideas here today. Pick one. You can pick others later, but for right now, this question, what's your next step? Concrete, guys. Networking is too general. Networking with somebody in the specific industry, that's specific, concrete, and we can hold each other accountable. What's the next step for you? What's your next step to get to this goal? Otherwise, it was just a good conversation. Action is what brings it into reality. Leverage my connections and make sure they are authentic, ensuring reliable contacts know my next steps. And Terrence, my guess is that next step is to get on a board. That's why we're here today. David, shout out. We got some documentation. We'll send that out to the registrants, and they'll have that from you as well. Text brothers that have shared their cell number and introduce yourself. Okay, so keeping that networking alive. My guess would be to introduce that you're looking to be on a board as well. That's key, guys. I see it in people's LinkedIn profiles, come like seeking board roles or board trained or some. It's in there. It's keyword ready to be captured. LinkedIn is all brand. It's mainly branding and marketing anyway. So that's a great place to put that kind of stuff. Determine what board relevant skills, competencies are in my current role. Love it. I would add on to that and then begin sharing that with others. That next step. Let's do one more. Leverage my existing relationships who currently sit on boards. Love it. Solid, clear. To know I am interested in joining a board. B, develop myself further. Okay, it kind of went away. This is phenomenal stuff, guys. These are the action steps. I want to help. Let's all help hold each other accountable to getting this done. Power the group. Let's pivot, guys. Let's pivot if that's okay. If that's all right, please drop pivot into the chat box. Pivot where? To your questions. That's where we're going next. If that's cool with you, if that's all right, please put pivot into the chat box so I know folks are on board, or maybe they want me asking more questions. Hey man, I got a list of questions I could ask. All right, they're saying pivot, let's do it. Please go ahead and just start dropping those questions. And actually, let's do it even better. Let's create more dialogue. If you have a question, please put your hand up, like Frederick Rogers has his hand up. We're going to get to as many as we can. David, let's move into laser coaching mode. You guys know laser's quick, right? A full coaching session is 15 minutes. Lasers, I might answer your question in 30 seconds. A minute, 2 minutes. Let's jump in. Frederick, please come off mute.
Thanks, David, for hosting facilitating this event today. It's nice to speak with you in person. Well, we kind of alluded to this during this conversation. There's this concept of like order qualifiers and order winners, for a business security like an order. So from the perspective of joining a for-profit board, what are some of like the order qualifiers to even be considered for a board opportunity? And what are you seeing as some of the kind of the order winners to being able to join a board? Because, in my interaction with board members and, reviewing board memberships, it seems like most people are on a board are active or retired C-suite executives.
Frederick,
so just trying to get an understanding of like, what does it take what do you need to be there what do you need to be to get there?
To answer your question very briefly.
David, hold on. David, just give me a second. Frederick, I want to personalize this, guys. So I just want to ask, Frederick, if you're asking about yourself, which I kind of hope that you are, can you make it, if you're open to sharing just a little bit about what is your current role? What kind of board are you thinking about? I want this to be as useful, customized for you as possible. If you're asking for you, if you're asking generally, David, let's have you hit it. But Frederick, if you're asking for you, let's get a little more context on where you're at now and where you want to be.
Well, I'm, currently a director level corporate finance executive, looking to transition to an officer level role. And there is at that point there's the potential exists to be able to be in a position to join a board. So I'm just trying to understand where do I need to be best positioned to join a for-profit board.
So do you currently have access to? Do you present to your corporate board of directors?
No, I've never been in a position where I've been doing that. I've actually produced the presentations that go to the board of directors, but not actually, giving them to the board.
So what can you do to get some audience with your board?
You could
other boards.
Yeah, you could do that in a in a nonprofit context. You could join a board and then of course be on one of the committees, and that would actually engage. You'd have the opportunity to present to your peers on the board and even to the other members of the leadership of that nonprofit organization.
If you were sitting down with the CEO of the company who's considering you, and they ask that question, what's your experience in even engaging with the board, and you don't have any of that relevant experience, then you've done yourself a disservice, right? But let's go back to your first question. because I too felt that, it was only CFOs or anybody in a financial context who would be considered for boards, because, all boards, public boards, are looking for folks to fill their audit committee, because that's one of the most important roles and responsibilities. However, your industry and functional expertise is also important, because these days, they're also looking for members that have, really solid knowledge in other areas relevant to the business, right? So, these days technology is huge, because cybersecurity is such a big topic, particularly in technology companies, right? But marketing, international operations for those that are expanding globally or have, huge M&A aspirations to become a global company, and other domains that might be considered there, okay? So it's not just traditionally, the finance folks who get opportunities. It's all a function of what that board needs at that time. And the only way you know that is to be networked inside those boards, so you can see if you can absolutely fill the niche. And it's not, exactly what you do today in your functional role inside the company as an operator. It is what you can bring to the board in terms of skill sets, in terms of knowledge-based relationships, whatever that is a forward look. What value proposition do you bring to the board that is beyond, above and beyond what you do functionally? Because again, your job is not to be a functional expert. I mean, a functional operator inside. They want your expertise so that you can provide advice and counsel on how this company needs to operate and improve its strategy, and from a go forward position. So there's unique value brought when you position yourself the right way, but you aren't going to be the perfect answer for most of the boards out there. From a timing and sequencing perspective, it's just not going to be, because not all boards are, looking for new board members. I mean, we're 2.5 years into our existence as a public company at Embecta. We have chosen our board. We've had our slate, and we've had external outreach for folks saying, hey, look, we'd like to join your board. We're not looking for new board members at this time. So it's impossible for anybody to be considered right now for this board. Will that be the same in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? I don't know, right? It just depends on what's happening in the marketplace. If there's external M&A, if we do M&A, or, whatever the marketplace dynamics are, it might change the requisite for the types of board members we need. We might need somebody else, depending on, if we acquired a certain type of company. Maybe the folks that sit on the board today don't have the expertise in cyber that we need. And so we might go out and say, hey, we've got to add somebody who comes from a cybersecurity background, right? You don't know what that is until you've had the conversations with people. That's why you've got to broaden your network and have active conversations across, many domains, across many industries, to see, when the window opens, and then are you well positioned to kind of step in those windows of opportunity and take advantage of them to ultimately be considered for board.
Absolutely, guys. So we're going to move into laser mode and try and get to as many questions as we can here today. Something that comes to mind immediately off top is, for your organization, if you're not already, hop on LinkedIn. David's already mentioned it. First off, identify who they are. First step, right? Who are they? Who are those 5 people, 6 people, 7 people, 8 people, however many? Get a list of who those people are. Find that out. Add them on LinkedIn, and you can follow. Hit the follow button, and you'll see all of their posts, I'm pretty sure, if you go to follow all, and you'll begin to know about them. Research them. Are they on a podcast? Have they written a book? Do they have a YouTube workshop? Study these people. There are people that will get on LinkedIn and tell you all about their family on YouTube. You can know all about their family, their background, their history, their beliefs, their thoughts. You can be in their brain before you reach out to them. Hey, I work at this company, board leadership, this thing you said, phenomenal, relationship, 15-minute call. And now you skipped all the way up, and you're on the phone with a board member. They may have a workshop. You can go to it, guys. So these are some things that come to mind. We can get them. Let's keep going. Kamar, let's have you go next. Jamal, let's have you pick it up after that.
Hey, David. Thanks for coming on the call, and another Philly guy. So man, I know why I like this guy so much. He's a noob, but I won't hold that against you with you Greek. But he is from Philly. So, but one of the questions I would ask is, you mentioned the Navy. what was your capacity? Were you a commissioned officer in the Navy or
Yeah.
enlisted? And if so, what those experiences, how did that help you transition and then eventually ascend to a board role?
So I was both. I started as an enlisted man, then went to the U.S. Naval Academy, and then spent 10 years as an officer. So I think the crux of what helped me there was leadership. I think another word I would use through that is fearlessness. The difference in military versus corporate settings is the fact that the military pushes leadership down to the lowest echelon. If you look at an aircraft carrier and the hundreds of people that run around on the deck when they are launching and recovering aircraft, the average age of the sailors on board that ship as they do that is 20 years old. So you've got 20-year-olds making life and death decisions on multi-million-dollar aircraft on a daily basis. Now you think about that 20-year-old coming out to a corporate context and how much decision-making authority that they have. So as a young officer at 22 years old, I stepped on board a ship and I'm in charge of a division of 25 men. The senior enlisted had been in the Navy 24 years and I'm 22 years old. I grew up in a Black family and I show deference to older men. And so I'm looking at this older man, but not, and remembering that I'm the officer. He's looking to me for guidance and that type of thing. But I also had a lot to learn as well. And so from a leadership perspective, I learned a lot from the Navy. But the biggest thing I learned was confidence. I switched careers from being on a ship to become a Navy public affairs officer. My first assignment as a PAO was in the Pentagon. And as a young lieutenant, same as a captain in the Army, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, it was not uncommon for me as a public affairs officer to be in the office with the chief of naval operations, the 4-star who runs all the U.S. Navy, and a reporter. It's just the three of us. Or the Secretary of the Navy, the civilian leader of the Navy, and myself and a reporter as a junior practitioner. Now, there are 1 and 2 and 3 stars that don't get access to the Secretary of the Navy. But as a young lieutenant, I learned that I could get in there and I could tell the Secretary of the Navy, hey, Mr. Secretary, that was great in that interview, but we've got this next one coming. And I would answer this question this way next time, right? You got to learn confidence to be able to tell the Secretary of the Navy, somebody at that level, that, you got mustard on your shirt and I disagree with what you said. I'm going to recommend you say something else. I carried that learning into my corporate career and I was fearless from the time I stepped into it. So that way I could step into difficult conversations or any conversation with senior people and not feel apologetic. I could ask questions, I could do those things. And so that's why I think my career, ascended so fast, just because of what I learned, during my time as a naval officer.
Thanks, David. And I'm a former an Army officer as well. That's why I asked that. And a lot of that has helped me as well.
Mm-hmm. While we have a dead space there, Jewel, one of the things I'll say is we all consider, where we are in our board journey and those types of things. As a coach, I talk to people all the way from C-suite all the way down to mid-level across all industries, et cetera. Particularly as Black men in the environments that we're in, there's so many conversations that we don't have with ourselves in terms of how ready we are to step into these environments. Because, hey, we may be a solid operator, we have great titles, we're getting compensated well, and those types of things. But I can tell you, even late into my, senior career, I had imposter syndrome in certain ways. And that imposter syndrome affected how I showed up, right? I might have had limiting beliefs, right? I could be a natural introvert and not comfortable talking to someone. Or even, you think about your book, your presentation style, right? If you're not a person that has to present to audiences on a regular basis, well, how is that inhibiting you in terms of what your potential success is going to be as you consider doing something that's not your functional expertise as you step into some of these board roles, okay? So, because there's many times in the board meeting, I got to raise my voice and say, hey, look, I disagree with this, or I agree with this, but I'd like us to think about it differently. If you're a shy, demure, somebody who's an introvert, maybe that's not your natural style. So you've got to really learn how to increase your ability to be able to do some of these things. And, I'm not going to be shy with it. Working with a coach is a way to kind of overcome a lot of those things and to have those conversations and to, absolutely dive into what's going to improve your ability across all, aspects of your professional makeup and your personal attitude and you know, objectives and everything else, just to, because many times we don't have these conversations with ourselves, we don't address them, and we don't feel like we have any people in an ecosystem that we can talk to. And that's why working with a coach in a safe and confidential environment is the way to tackle some of those issues.
Folks, we are going to wrap up. You know, I'm just, you know, also learning in real time. We're going to have to start the questions earlier so we can get to all of them. So definitely going to be tweaking that going forward. However, David, if you could drop your link in there just one more time, you guys can reach out to him direct. Skip the middleman, go right to him. He's right there. He'll answer your questions as well. So you all have a connection with the brother who's on a board. Pick his brain on how you can get there too. I want to thank you all very much for being here today. The expectation is to operate at the highest levels of corporate leadership. And I just want to thank you all for answering that call in your own life, however you see fit, and where you want to end up in your own professional journey. David, we're going to have you back. We're going to weave you into the Black Executive Men community. I surely hope so, because you are solid gold. Guys, we're going to wrap it up with that. Until next time, take care.
Thank you, brothers.